Brodes Media.
The professionalism and the pace of play that Harden plays with. He just sees what's happening in front of him at such a great pace for him to break it all down, and knows when to drive and gets the contact, knows when the step back three is coming. And that step back three, he gets to where he wants to on the floor. He knows exactly what he's going to do. His defender knows exactly what he's going to do. And at the end of the day, it's just not enough because his execution is so severe and it hurts. And then here's Maxey in the third quarter and the speed of him. He's flying all around. That is a turning point of this game. And we've talked about it a billion times already, but when you see it over and over and over again, it really is mesmerizing to think about the way that he has his angles going and how fast of the pace really is compared to what an Embiid and a James Harden plays like. They play at an important pace. They play at a professional pace. Maxey's just a go-getter, and it's such a curveball when you're defending. It puts you in an uncomfortable position, and now he's knocking down threes on top of it. He drilled 4 3-pointers, and what was that spinorama one at the end of the shot clock that didn't make sense at all? You could see the Knicks literally looking around like, what in the world is going on here? How am I supposed to stop that? And not only that, how the hell did that go in? Maxey's a big ball of energy, and the kid's got nuts. He's got testicles. He has a big set of balls that he puts on the table and says, have at it. You know what I mean? Like, match me. Match my balls. That's what he says. And you can't. You just cannot. I talked about Toby is clearly lacking confidence right now, even though I don't want to downplay some of his shots that he did make because there were some big ones in there. I'll tell you what, Maxey, when you play with superstar talent this young in your career and you think to yourself, I want the shots. I am just as good as they are. And they love it too. I mean, he walks to the bench and Harden's smacking him in the shoulder, smacking him in the rear end. The guys are kind of pushing him a little bit in excitement, thinking about the shots that he just put down. When you have that type of, like you got your teammates have your back and all. But then, I mean, I'm sure it's easier, and I'm sure they're letting him know, Maxey, when you're open, don't be afraid. You're just as much a part of this as anybody else, so don't worry about me or Embiid. Just shoot the ball. That's your job when you're wide open, and he is killing it right now, and it's a beautiful watch for sure. They were only down 7 at half, and it was probably like a 20-point game. So when you realize, well, it's only 7, right? And then somehow they're up 12 by the end of 3, and that's when they really just kind of kick the Knicks out of town, and they can leave the Wells Fargo to go back to Madison Square Garden. I need a sip of my coffee, that's for sure. So James Harden, 26, 9, and 9. Some of these passes are ridiculous. We saw some Joel Embiid and James Harden pick and rolls again. One got to Matisse Thybulle underneath the basket for a little tip in, and then another was a beautiful kick out for Danny Green. I loved every moment of the play. Here comes Harden coming around the screen, and Embiid's rolling to the basket. There's a nice pass in rhythm towards the rack, and then as the defenders collapse on him, he kicks it out to Danny Green for 3. I don't know how you're going to stop that. And if you have the spacing on the floor that you do and the players who have the ability to drain them, then you're in a good position. But I love that action, and I think it's absolutely going to continue to thrive, and it's basically unstoppable if you're trying to defend that, because if you don't want to give up that corner 3 to Danny Green, which I'd imagine you'd give up that look over Embiid wide open without anyone in his way for an easy slam dunk and an easy 2, I'd rather live and die to see if Danny Green makes the shot or not if I'm the opponent. But it's going to be a very difficult task. And James Harden all around, even those buckets I mentioned early in that second half that started the Sixers getting into rhythm, it's the fake step back that opens up the ability. It's just the fact that James Harden, when he's utilizing a pick, you could see his head is up, his head's on a swivel, and he's got 7 options. And he knows exactly where he's going to go in the split second of time that he needs to. And if he recognizes that maybe it's not as available as he would like, option 2 is already in his brain. And then the next pass is happening, whether it's to the corner or it's a reset moment where it's like, okay, I don't like what I saw. Let's kind of pull back a little bit and reset this thing. And then it comes down to an isolation. But my guy gets 9 assists, and a very casual 9 assists, as if he's just not dropping dimes at will, hitting guys going down the floor, full speed. We always talked about how it was underrated what he did vision-wise, and I stand by that. But you got to remember, he played with who in the past? Chris Paul. He played with who in the past? Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. This might be his best match when it comes to another teammate in Joel Embiid based off of the fit. And now it's really on him to be the primary guy. And it's a big difference when you're playing alongside someone else who's arguably the best point guard to play in Chris Paul. And then a Kyrie Irving who's a very ball-dominant guy. And a Kevin Durant who wants the ball and wants to operate in isolation as well. Think about the mix between the two-man game of a Harden now being able to be that legitimate primary dog always. And he's just going out there nonchalantly. You want to talk about rebounds? Trust me, rebounds get annoying. And we've seen the New York Knicks grab some boards, and you hear the, oh, come on, out in the fans, out in the seats. And it is annoying, for sure. But he grabs 9, too. 26, 9, and 9. Just another day of clocking in and clocking out at the office. And I was informed that this guy was washed up. I was informed that this guy didn't have anything left in the tank, except for the fact that he has everything left in the tank. And somehow you keep seeing these three-point shooting lists, and we watch Steph Curry make history earlier, and he's ridiculous at his craft. James Harden is sneaking up there just as well in the Reggie Miller category. Come on now, in the Ray Allen category. Yet this guy, oh, you got James Harden, he stinks. Now all the comments are, who cares what he does now? Just wait for the postseason to fail, because that's how he does. That's what he does in postseason play. Don't worry about now. See, now the narrative's changing. He's doing fine at the moment with the Sixers, but he's known as a choke artist in the postseason. So just wait. He's known as a choke artist because he lost games before. Now, all of a sudden, you can never win playoff games because you've lost playoff games before. Imagine if you used that as your example for every player in NBA history. You'd be a fool. You'd be an absolute idiot and an absolute moron. $5 coming in from Joel. Not going to lie, I'm a little concerned about Harden. Looked at his highlights and numbers in the playoffs. What do you mean? What are you nervous about? What are you concerned about? You're nervous because you looked at his highlights and numbers in the playoffs. So you're going to compare James Harden going up against the Golden State Warriors in the Eastern Conference, may I add, with Chris Paul having lingering issues and him playing with Houston a handful of years ago to playing with Joel Embiid in this Eastern Conference with Joel Embiid playing at an MVP rate and Tyrese Maxey. My point is, what happened in Houston with that team has zero correlation to what this team can do in this year. This moment. It's two totally different teams. Now, you can learn from your playoff flaws. See, the same people that watched Michael Jordan lose to the Pistons every year, you think those people back then said, Michael Jordan can never win a championship. Michael Jordan, there's no way he'll ever succeed. I watched his highlights against the Bulls. He's just not good enough. He doesn't have the talent. He's not clutch enough. He doesn't score enough when he needs to. He can't get by the Pistons. He stinks. And then he eventually does. Losing in the playoffs does not mean you don't have enough talent to win. Let me ask you this. Did Charles Barkley have enough talent to win an NBA championship? Wouldn't you take your chances with someone named Charles Barkley in an NBA playoff run? Of course you would, because you can win with talent that maybe necessarily doesn't have a Larry O'Brien. It doesn't mean they don't give you the best opportunity to win a championship. There's plenty of players who have never won, but it doesn't mean their talent's not good enough to win. But sometimes you run into a Michael Jordan Bulls era. Sometimes you run into the Golden State Warriors that add Kevin Durant, or the Golden State Warriors before Kevin Durant. Sometimes you run into a Shaq and Kobe. Think about all those teams that never won. The Utah Jazz, Charles Barkley. There's a billion players that have the skill level to do it that maybe just don't win a championship because there's a lot of variables. But does that mean you don't want them on your team? That's silly. All the guys that eventually win, go back to their playoff history before they win. You don't think that there's ugly losses? You don't think that there's bad game 6s, bad game 7s? You don't think that there's a bad home game, a game 3 at home? You got a chance to go up in the series, but you looked a little lost and you had a bad one. You had a tough one. Of course. That's called being an athlete. Every athlete has that moment. So to say because he failed in the past, that means that there's no sort of success that can occur now. That's silly to me. But that's a common narrative. That's a common discussion right now. And that's silly. It really is. I don't even understand a little bit on how anyone could feel that way.
I just had to call in when I just, heard the Harden comments because I'm starting to see a lot of those too. And honestly, as a big Harden fan, I'm glad that you're defending him because it's very unfair and not logical for people to keep bringing up Harden's playoff stats. I mean, I want people to take some time to go back and look at that Houston team and look at who he was playing with now. I mean, the second option on the team was Eric Gordon. You feel me? So in any playoff series, when it comes to the playoffs, no superstar in NBA history has ever been able to do it by themselves. Because if, for example, if you just have one superstar, the key for the other team is to double. So at that point, at a certain point, you're going to have to rely on your role players, on your other guys.
Yeah. And you know what? Here's another
Now,
point of it, too, real quickly is, we're just going to downplay the fact that when you lose to the Golden State Warriors, which is one of the most iconic runs we've ever seen, it's like last year, Kevin Durant by himself did everything he possibly could to try and beat the Milwaukee Bucks by himself. Now, he ended up falling short, and it got to Game 7 and all, and it was a hell of a ride. But at the end of the day, the Milwaukee Bucks were probably a better team. When you think of those Rocket squads and like losing to Golden State and all, I mean, you're losing to the Golden State Warriors here. I mean, that's not something just to sniff at.
exactly. I'm glad you brought that up because if you want to just look at the two teams on paper, Golden State was really supposed to blow Houston out of the water. Like, as a big Harden fan, this has been my argument for years because the media, what it is, why it gets downplayed is because these national media sites, they're going to create their narratives for every player. Like, they love LeBron. So if LeBron goes off and competes hard against the Warriors, Bron showed hard and it was, he showed a great effort. But when it's James Harden, who isn't as liked because he was going to the free throw line all the time, we're forgetting that this dude is playing with Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker in a starting lineup and actually competing. Like, some of the nonsense of these people, you just got to go in and look between the lines. I really think this is our year to compete, man.
I agree, man. I agree. Thank you so much for taking the time to call in. Definitely some good passion in the direction of James Harden. And I just hate how it's a lazy narrative to just say, well, you failed before. That means you'll never have the opportunity to succeed again. It's a loser mentality for sure. And that's not to say that, and look, there's different variables here, okay? Furkan Korkmaz sucks at basketball. He's always going to suck at basketball. I'm talking about when you have a Barkley, a Harden, the list of players that never won a championship, just because they never won, that doesn't mean that they can't. And I'm talking about when you have eyes and you see the game and you understand what the superstar talent tier is like, the superstar talented tier players that never did, it doesn't mean because they failed in the past. All the ones that you loved failed in the past. And someone brought this up in the chat, $5 coming in from Joe. They said it was impossible for Giannis to win until he did. Exactly. These players that you love and you're so excited about, well, they've done it before. You don't think that they've ever lost in a playoff series? You don't think they ever had a bad playoff series before they ever won? Of course they did. It's all part of the journey and the learning experience and the growth that I talk about. You don't just snap your fingers and you become this player that never fails. Failing, it fuels the winners in this league. That's what it does. If you're the right type of mentality, like a Joel Embiid, you don't think losing factored into Joel Embiid being here today? Because you'd be a fool to think that Joel Embiid's just here because he's just here. No, he was in pain, emotional pain for those losses to Kawhi, that loss to Kawhi Leonard, that loss to the Celtics. all these playoff woes, the turnovers in the postseason. You don't think those turnovers in the postseason played a role into him working on his passing and now anticipating double teams and hitting Matisse Thybulle cutting? And that's just one example. But it shows you when you fail a bunch of times doing something, then you then apply what it takes to get better. And then you see it on the court over the years and throughout the seasons that, wow, those failures made Joel Embiid better. And then you watch the next postseason run happen. And then you see the next postseason run happen. And losing over these past handful of seasons is a big reason why Joel Embiid is where he's at today.